Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Kodak House. Who is here from the College of Southern Nevada? Welcome. Very cool. Yes, I'm glad this worked out. So this is our very special space here in Hollywood. We host filmmaker Q&As like we're doing tonight. We also do educational programming here, and we offer the space up to other industry partners for them to host their own events here at times. Ari, who's going to be moderating today, also hosts Coffees with Kodak the first Friday of the month generally. So if you're ever in town, and those of you who've been here, I know there's some very familiar faces, but those of you who haven't been here, please stay tuned. We're trying to do a lot of community and educational programming here. So today I'm really excited to introduce Mark Jenkin. He is an auteur of a very special kind. We were joking, speaking about this beforehand, and he does a lot of the trades on his movies. So he is writer, director, cinematographer, composer, editor, sound designer, and there's not a lot of that these days, and especially when you get to making a movie at the level of Rose of Nevada, that he continued to own all those parts of the craft, which is really special. He also shoots his movies on a Bolex, which is also a very unique approach to feature filmmaking. But we're really excited to have him speak here today. We've been trying to do this for a while, and so you guys were lucky to be in town at the right time. So Ari Davidson, again, from Kodak, will moderate, and I'd like to welcome to the room director and all the other things, filmmaker Mark Jenkin.
Hello again, Mark.
Hello, a director's chair.
Yeah.
I've never sat on one.
Filmmaker chair. We'll make an exception for you this time. Hey guys, how many of you have seen this movie, Rose of Nevada? Anybody? All right, great. All right, how many people have seen Bait? Cool. Great films. Mark, a lot of people, and especially a lot of students from University of Western Nevada, right, guys? Southern Nevada. I'm learning. Bear with me. You know, a lot of people get into filmmaking to how dare you? Get into filmmaking to escape, the same reason that the audiences tune in to escape and find a new world and learn something new about a new culture, new world that they've never experienced before. Yet you have now made 3 feature films in the region of the UK you still live in, Cornwall. Why? I'm curious. What is it about that environment and the culture that you know and represent so well? Why has that been the magnet that pulls creativity out of you and onto film?
Because it's the center of the world, and I think, and it is for me because it's where I'm from. So it's the only place I understand. It's the only place that I'm sort of intimate with in any way. I know the people, I know the culture, I know the history, I know the way that people live. So it's the only place on the planet, I think, that I can communicate authentically on screen. So I don't think any of my films are ever about Cornwall. If they were about Cornwall, I think the appeal would be very limited. But the setting up until now has always been Cornwall, because for me the context and the setting has to be totally authentic. Because the audience is really clever, I think, and I count myself as an audience member. I'm not trying to flatter anybody, but I think
You have enough credits. You don't need to take that
audience member.
Yeah.
But I think people sniff out films that are phony.
Sure.
I couldn't make a film here in LA. Because I don't know it well enough. I've been here before. I love it, but I'm not intimate with it. I don't know enough people. I haven't immersed myself in it. So I couldn't make a film here. In the same way that I think people who don't know Cornwall couldn't come to Cornwall and make an authentic film. It doesn't stop them doing it, but they're awful films because they're phony. And they've got good intentions, they've got great writers, great directors, great actors, great everything. but the setting is inauthentic. So the audience will check out quite early on. I think everybody's probably watched a film and straight away sensed something isn't right, you know. And that's not to say, I mean, having said that, my next film may well be shot over here, a road movie from upstate New York to Wisconsin is this film that I'm working on at the moment. But the perspective is from an outsider. It's about a Cornish woman coming to America in the 70s. So it's an outside eye. So it's a different look at that place. But so I couldn't write an upstate New Yorker going to Wisconsin, because I'd be guessing, right? I'd be guessing about that experience. So that's why I do it. It's about authenticity. 'Cause the other thing I always say is I can't control whether people like my films, right? They might not like the way they're shot. They might not like the actors. They might not like my cinematography. They might not like my sound design. They might not like the subject matter. I can't control any of that. If everybody liked my films, then God knows what type of film that would be. But what I can control is the authenticity of it. If somebody said to me, "This feels phony," that would kind of break my heart a little bit. So there's not an invitation for anybody
Sure.
to say that.
Yeah.
But I go on Letterboxd and read reviews because at some level I must hate myself, and and there's multitude of reasons why people attack my films and other people's films. But the authenticity is never really questioned, and that's the thing that I hold really dear.
Yeah, I don't think it. I never felt like any of the movies are about Cornwall per se, but there is a very endearing authenticity about it, where the whole world feels lived in. It doesn't feel like you rolled in with a bunch of, trucks and crew that were imported from some big city, and you're just making a story in quotes. So I really admire that authenticity, but I'm also wondering, does that quest for authenticity also inform your technical selection of shooting your films on a Bolex camera?
Yeah, and I have to say that in this room, right?
No, you don't. No, I mean, I was joking with Mark in the office before. I said, we also have sync sound cameras in this day and age. So I'm just curious.
That'll never catch
You
on.
don't have to do it this way, but I'm wondering why. What is it about your process that you haven't given it up? And if anything, it's now sought after. That's part of what comes with you. It's not often that filmmakers rise from obscurity and get to keep their process and their voice. So I'm wondering, now that we have some film students in the room, what would you advise other filmmakers who want to be bold and want to have some authority over their process? How would you advise them to inform and advocate for themselves?
Just never compromise and follow your gut is the main thing to do. And like shooting a feature film on a Bolex with 100-foot rolls, shooting everything silently, post-syncing all the sound, hand processing the negative if you can, not shooting coverage, is the best way to make a film. But that's for me. I'm not saying that's the best for everybody. But what I think I'm lucky enough to have done is to found my way back to making films in a way that excited me when I was 14 years old, that really, just really fired my imagination. And that means writing the scripts, directing, shooting them, doing the sound design, editing. Even I've accidentally fallen into doing the music for my films as well. I never did that when I was younger.
The score on this one is incredible.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
But I've kind of, but having said that, it's a paradox because I get all of this credit for doing all of these roles, which is fine. I like it. I lean into it.
It's good to be seen.
But I work with a huge team of collaborators who I couldn't make these films without. And I should say, like, the most important person is Denzel Monk, who's the producer, and producers don't get enough credit. And so that's the other thing that I'm really lucky with, is that I work with an amazing producer who's also my script editor, who works on story with me, who works in the edit with me, is always there, knows what I want to do sometimes before I know what I want to do. So but going back to your question, I think it comes with age as well. It took me a long time. It took me 20 years to become an overnight success. I remember when I was here, the first time I came out here, I met with a manager down in West Hollywood, and I went and I spoke to him, and I was probably in my mid-40s, I suppose about 4 years ago, and he said to me, really lovely guy, and he said to me, how does it, and like, you know, my films had started to sort of break out, and he said, how does it feel to get success so late in life? And I was like, geez, you know, and me and him are the same age, you know, but out here, he'd been an actor originally, you know, so he'd been an actor and he'd been an agent and he'd been a manager, and he'd done really well in all of those things. So you know, for him, you know, he was thinking, he's basically saying to me, where the hell have you been? And I was like, well, I've been working, I've been chipping away at it. My first film, Bait, took 19 years from when I put the pen to paper for the first draft to when it was finished. And I shot draft 42 of that screenplay before, you know, and then it kind of blew up after that. So I think I was in quite a lucky position that film broke out, and the meetings I was having with people who were saying, what are you going to do next? We're talking to somebody who was in their 40s, not somebody who was like 23. And that's not to say somebody in their 40s knows what they want to do and is able to articulate it any more clearly than somebody's in their early 20s. But I think the person who's asking that person the question talks to somebody in their 40s differently than they talk to somebody in their 20s. And I think there's multiple examples of people who've made an amazing first film that nobody was waiting for. They've done it below the radar, no input from anybody, done something, you know, batshit crazy that's connected with an audience, because audiences, and I include myself in the audience again, don't know what they want, and they see something crazy and different that comes out, and that filmmaker gets a lot of success, but they then get told, or, you know, it's not like a kind of a mean or manipulative thing, but kind of get led in a way that maybe isn't going to be helpful for their career. And the second film doesn't live up to the first career, and they sometimes take a long way to get back to where they were, if they ever do get back to where they were. So, and the other thing is, like, film is 130 years old as an art form, which is crazy. I turned 50 a few weeks ago. And so I've been working in the industry for 30 years, and it's 130 years old. So I still consider myself very young, despite
the one
despite
comment.
what the Hollywood managers tell me. But I've been working in the film industry for a hell of a long time, you know. So really, film's done nothing yet. We haven't really got started yet. So for people to be told this is the way you've got to do it, it's like, well, who says, you know? And we're living through that at the moment with what's happening with the films that everybody's talking about. You know, who saw that coming? Well, I mean, young people saw that coming. It's just everybody else didn't see it coming. So I think it's finding what you love. It's finding where your passion is and making films in that way, because it takes so much energy to make a film, you know.
Yeah.
And if you're not 100% passionate about it, and your battery is on 100% when you start, you'll never get to the end, because it's going to take all of that to get to the end. If you start and you're a bit unsure of what you're doing and you're not feeling the passion about it, you won't get to the end, or you'll get to the end and you won't be satisfied with what you've done, you know. So I genuinely, I go to bed, and I feel quite emotional about this because I feel how lucky I am, but I go to bed on a Sunday night excited about waking up on Monday morning to go to work. And I didn't have that until I completely redesigned the way I made films, which was going back to shooting on film, shooting on a Bolex, doing the sound in post, doing all of the sound in post, no location sound, because I love sound so much. I knew I couldn't do it as well as directing and shooting. And I just developed a way of working that I get so excited about it. My only fear is one day I'll wake up and the passion's gone, but it doesn't, you know. We were walking up the street from the hotel, and I just saw the Kodak house. I saw the Kodak logo, and it was like, I just feel like a kid. It's like, oh my God, you know, every time I get a Super 8 cartridge, when I open a Super 8 cartridge, it still feels like, I still feel as excited as I did the day that I got my first ever Super 8 cartridge in 1993, and I opened it up and I put it in a camera and I shot my first film on Super 8. That excitement is still exactly the same. Why shouldn't we all have jobs, if we can, that fills us with that amount of excitement? And I know I'm talking from a privileged position, but as you know, it took me a long time to get to this position.
Sure.
But don't second guess what other people think you should be doing. When we did Rosa Nevada, I'd made Bait and I'd made Ennis May, and they were both successful critically and commercially in the context of the size of the films they were. I went to a meeting with the execs for Rosa Nevada, and it was a lot more money, and the exec said, so how are you going to make this? And I said, well, obviously I'm not going to shoot it myself. We won't shoot it on the Bolex. I'll use a cinematographer. We'll record location sound, and I'll work with an editor. And in the room they went, why? And I went, don't I have to? And they were like, no. And then on the train on the way home, Denzel, who's always one step ahead of me, said, you've got to remember that people want to back your films because of the way you make them, not despite the way you make them. And that was the moment. It was like, okay, yeah, I've got to stick to the way that I love making films.
I mean, that's so incredible, because, I mean, for the last 20 years, it's been the technical specs and marketing specs, too, have really pushed filmmakers to make choices based on things that just aren't creative. And the camera's always just been a box with a hole in it that captures light that comes through a lens. And I love the way that you really push that to the highest degree by using what's effectively a sewing machine with a lens. But seriously, it's so inspiring to see somebody make numerous feature films that are quite good with rudimentary tools and great story. I've heard a quote attributed to you that goes, if you're making if you're making a independent film, or how could you afford not to shoot on film? It's something like that. So I'd love for you to tell, if it is attributed to you, just tell me more about this idea that how could you afford not to shoot on film? Because that's typically the first thing that filmmakers are told they can't afford, is to shoot on film.
Yeah, and I don't understand where that came from. Who tells people that they can't shoot on film? A friend of mine was shooting.
I'll name later when we're off the air.
Okay, yeah. Or you could just say it and it could be beeped out. But the thing is, if I shot a film on film in the way that I might shoot a film digitally, then yeah, I couldn't afford to do that. I'd bankrupt myself, like, in the first morning. But if you shoot film and play to the strengths of shooting film, then it's not prohibitively expensive. And in fact, how are you measuring cost? Mm-hmm. We were talking earlier. When I made Bait, I shot 127 rolls of 16mm black and white negative, 100-foot rolls. I hand processed them in the sink in my studio.
By choice.
By choice. It took 3 months. Right? Nobody was waiting for that film. Nobody was waiting for a hand-processed black and white 16mm film about Cornish fishermen. So nobody was knocking on the door going, have you finished the film yet? If anything, people were hoping that the film hadn't been finished by the sound of it. But I would, every day, process rolls of film in photographic developer, standard photographic developer, that I'd mix up in a bucket each morning.
Your home must have smelled...
Well, no, this is my studio.
Oh, okay.
So I've got a little studio. So I did it in the sink. And when I finished processing it all after 3 months, so we finished the shoot. For 3 months, nobody saw any footage from the shoot for 3 months. That was the best thing could possibly happen. Because after 3 months, we sent the neg off to be scanned at Kodak, and they sent back a drive with all of the digital proxy files on it. We'd had a 3-month gap. I say we, I don't know who we is, it was me. I then saw the footage, and was like, I had 3 months distance. I'd forgotten the shoot pretty much. It had been recorded over in my brain by the experience of hand processing all of this negative. And then I looked at the footage. It was like watching somebody else's rushes. And it was like, right, well, I know what this film is. And I was saying to you earlier, that drive came back. We had 4.5 hours of rushes for a feature film. I sat for 4.5 hours. I plugged the drive into the projector in my front room at home and watched it on the screen. And for 4.5 hours, I watched the rushes, barely breathing, because I was waiting for the roll that I'd screwed up the processing of. And after 4.5 hours, some of them were better than others, but it got to the end, and I had all of the film was all there, and I just cried with relief. Like 3 months of relief just came out. I had lunch. I played it again, 4.5 hours of rushes, and I sat there. And by the end of that 4.5 hours, I'd done an edit in my head of the film. That was on the Monday. I spent 4 days editing, and by Friday evening, I had a rough cut of a feature film. How's that expensive? The time, it just killed all of that time. 4 days later, I had a working film because I had 4.5 hours of rushes for a feature film. So people saying, oh yeah, it's too expensive. It's like, what are you talking about? Look at, you pay a bit of money, but look at all of that time you save. So I think I genuinely don't know. Well, I do know, where this idea that it costs too much money, partly out of people who are making money out of the other way of working, and partly out of ignorance, people not willing to look into it. And again, I'm blessed to work with Denzel Monk, who looks at the sums and goes, he puts his financial producer head on and goes, well, the sums they add up. We can shoot it on film. And it just means, okay, we've got enough money, you've got this many feet of film. And I go, great, that's the best thing. Tell me how much film I've got. And he'll say, oh, you've got so many thousand feet. And for me, it's like, can I have a little bit less? That's better for me, because then I don't have to think as much. The more restrictions, the better for me. Because I'm a big believer you've got two brains. You've got one in your head and the one in the gut. And the one in the gut is the important one to follow, because that's the one that you've got that saves your life. It tells you whether to, what's the expression? Fight or flight. Leg it or confront it. The one in your head is the one that is an idiot, that screws everything up. That one's for thinking and that one's for feeling. And the more limitations, the more you just follow your gut. So if I've got, for bait, we had 127 rolls. I think we maybe had 150 in the budget. I think we definitely did, because I still had rolls of XX black and white neg in the fridge until a few weeks ago that I was still shooting that I think were left over. But we only shot 127 rolls because I don't shoot coverage. Right. Because the other thing is I'm so attached to film as a thing, right? This is as an object that so this is the journey of film in relation to the way I work. The film arrives from Kodak in a box, right? It's like Christmas Day. Open it, put the rolls of film in the fridge, and all of those rolls of film sit in the fridge, right? And they wait to be part of a film. And then I take them out of the fridge and we go on location, and each roll of film, in turn, I load into the camera. And I do that physically, I'm touching the film, I put the film in there, wind it through the gate, put the door back on, tape it up, and then the film waits in there till it's its turn to shine. And every frame has its moment in the light as it goes through the gate, through the shutter. And I hear it go through. I hear every frame go through, and I can almost hear them giggling with excitement that it's their moment. And then when they've all gone through each row, I take them out and I put them in the can, and then they all wait there, and they all lay there as a latent image on the negative, sometimes for weeks, until they either go off to the lab or I hand process them. And then they go through my rewind tank, or they go through the machine at Kodak, and each frame has its moment where that latent image comes alive and becomes that bit of film. And then they get scanned and they become digital images, and then ultimately, they go through the edit, and then it gets printed back to film at the end. But the idea that all those little guys who've been with me through the whole process are going to end up on the cutting room floor, that breaks my heart. I sound mental, don't I, when I say it out loud? But I'm so attached to film, and I hate the idea of the cutting room floor, that I've tried to eradicate it by never shooting anything that I know there's a risk that I won't use. So I tend to shoot 1 or 2 takes of everything, because I can't face, shooting film but not using film. So that just keeps the cost massively down as well, And because I shoot film on that specific camera, I don't record location sound. So we don't have a sound department on set, which sounds bad because it's like,
Yeah. How do the actors like that? How's it working? I mean, obviously, since you're a director too. I mean, how do they like your process of recording the sound later?
Well, I don't know, because I wouldn't speak for them, but I can paraphrase what George and Callum have both said about it, is that they both found it challenging in different ways, but then being challenged isn't necessarily a negative thing. They both came to the film knowing that it was a batshit crazy way of making a film, and that's what attracted them to it. Again, they were coming to work with me because of the way that I make films, not despite the way I make films. So I think they both knew it was going to be... every actor I've met despises doing ADR. I've never met an actor who likes doing ADR, but I don't do ADR. It's not additional or replacing anything. It's just the second half of their performance, or not even the second half, the last 10% of their performance, because the performance is locked visually. It's locked with the eyes, especially the way I shoot so many close-ups. The performance is locked, and recording the dialogue's really just the icing on the cake at the end of the process. So I think they, I won't say they enjoy it, although I think they do. Because I don't want to speak for them, because it might turn out some of them never want to work with me again because they hated it.
Well, it hasn't been an issue, it seems. I mean,
no, and it's funny because there's some of the actors that I work with who are a bit more old school, who are used to ADR and looping with film loops, and so Francis McGee, who plays the skipper in Rosa Nevada, is a sort of a generation.
He's terrific.
Yeah, I mean he's a sort of generation or two older, so he came in to do his looping, as he would refer to it. I'd call it dialogue recording because we're not looping, but he would still call it looping. And, the image would come up and he would do the line, and then I'd go, great, do you want to go again? And he would go, nope, I think we got that. Because he was used to having to get it done. And then I would say, okay, well, thinking, no, I want another, and then we'd watch it back, and he was absolutely right. He'd got it in one, and then we would move on. Whereas some of the other, like George and Callum, both 2 different ways of doing it. George would watch it and do it to picture in the same way, but do several takes, and then we would look at it and sort of choose a take we liked. The way Callum did it was he would watch the picture, and then he would look away from the screen, and he would do 5, 6, 7 versions of it blind, and then we would drop each one in and see which one we liked. So I think it was new for everybody. Even the people who'd done the traditional way, it was still kind of new as a process. So
I mean, as an audience member, it's refreshing to see this movie. And hearing you talk about film so romantically, I mean, I thought I was a film romantic. Holy cow. I mean, it just feels like that kind of energy is infectious too. I would go along with that process, no problem. You guys ready to see maybe a scene we can talk about? I mean, the texture in your films is just second to none. But this film in particular, I mean, it's just so striking.
I love that scene, actually. I didn't know what clip you were going to show, but I love that scene because that's 4 different locations. That scene was shot over a month.
Movie magic.
Yeah, and so I destroy the magic of movies, but the it starts off in the below deck in the fish hold, which is studio, and it ends in the bunk room, which is studio, which is the same set. We shot all of the stuff below deck in the galley, and then destroyed that set. There's a storm sequence and that was on a gimbal, which we'd made out of scaff poles and timber and car tires, which was done by the amazing art department led by Dave Garb, who's this amazing constructor. And then there's a storm sequence. So I went in with the camera when we'd filmed all the scenes in the galley, and we had a load of film students from Falmouth University who were operating the gimbal, and they'd been gently rocking it for the fishing sequences when they were below deck. For the storm, it was like free swim, do whatever you want. And I was inside with a stills photographer, and who was I in there with? Somebody from Tony from the art department, and they just shook the absolute shit out of it, and it shook the set to pieces. But there's some amazing footage in the storm sequence where, you know, below there, trying to stay upright with it going backwards and forwards, and then like, you know, a cup flies through the frame. And then it goes back the other way, and then a radio flies. This is on the rushes; it's not in the film. And then the stills photographer flies through the frame. It's kind of amazing. It was like, right, cut. We got to stop now. But so that was then we built the fish room set afterwards. And this was at the end of the shoot, but at the very first bit of the shoot, the beginning of that scene was shot almost at the beginning of the shoot. So it's actually 7 weeks apart. And so when you're looking down into the fish room, that's studio. When you're looking out of the fish room, that's up at Roz, who's the actress on the quay. That's a harbour. And then looking down onto the deck of the boat when they come out and walk across the deck, that's a different harbour. And I don't think Callum and George were ever there when Roz was there. So that both of those people were actually delivering their lines to Nick, the first AD, from what I can remember. So to see it, you know, when you look at the rushes and they're silent and they're different locations and it's a studio, you know, I get my rushes delivered on an iPad every couple of days to skim through, and I kind of just go through. I try not to look at them. I just go through to look at my exposures are okay, skim through them, and then I give them back to my assistant. But sometimes there'll be somebody from the crew who will look over my shoulder and watch as I'm watching them, and I know that they're thinking, this isn't going to make a film. These are just fragments that aren't going to cut together. And I'm thinking in my head, this isn't going to make a film. But what I'm saying is, no, this is great. This is going to work perfectly. But it's not until I get in the edit and you put all of these fragments together that on their own mean less than nothing, and then you put the sound on it as well, suddenly it becomes something that convinces. And that's the beauty of filmmaking.
Do you do a bit of storyboarding or editing on set when you block or rehearse or anything? Do you kind of have an assembly going while you're shooting and picking out the performances and the cuts?
Yeah, but I never write anything down because I'm the...
Well, you'd never have time.
Because I'm the director and the cinematographer and the editor.
Yes.
I don't need to communicate anything to...
Right.
And though, because I'm all three of those people, the cinematographer, the director, and the editor get on quite well. Communication sometimes breaks down, which is really problematic. But I don't. Sometimes on a logistical level, I'll articulate something with a terrible drawing to, my gaffer or Flo, production designer, or whoever from the art department there. Sometimes I'll quickly draw something, but I'm shooting for the edit the whole time. So I'll shoot something, and the Bolex, you don't have a monitor with it. And there's no video village, which is the other bonus. So nobody can see anything except for me through the viewfinder. And so I'll think, well, if I shoot, this scene is like 7 shots. And it's like, well, if I get that shot, I don't need one of the other shots. So we can actually shoot this in 6 shots. And then I start thinking, and I speak to my camera assistant, say, we could actually do this in 5 shots, couldn't we? So the plan kind of gets thrown out. And I'll make notes on the script and go, the reason I've shot it like this is because it's going to cut to this, or I've had an idea that it's going to jump back in time, or more likely I'm going to jump forward in time at this point because I like jumping around in time a lot. And that's the luxury. And also the other thing is there's so many shots in this film that were just grabbed from wherever. I'd be walking down to the set with George and Callum chatting, and I've just got the camera in my hand.
With your A-cam. Yeah.
Well, I've just got it there. All it is a light meter around my neck, a camera in my hand, and rolls of film in a bag over my shoulder. And so we'd be walking down the harbour, and so there'll be a bit of light on the water. And I'll go, hold on a minute, and I'll just quickly wind the camera, shoot that, not think about it again, and then I'm in the edit, and then I see all of this stuff that I've got in bins. It's like, that's really interesting, because if I cut that with that, it means something else. And then it really comes alive in the edit. And so it gets things that happen in the edit that I haven't got the imagination to write on the page, but I think my strength is I can recognize that within the edit. Yeah.
Well, to that point of grabbing it and progressively making a
can
movie.
I just say one other thing, actually?
Sorry,
just to butt in. But there was... So in the script, at the beginning of this film, there's a title sequence. So all the title was going to run over the top of these shots, which were of a derelict harbour, rusting, close-ups of rusting bits of boat, seaweed, oil, litter, rotting timber to show that this harbour is derelict. It's written in detail in the script with titles running over it. We didn't shoot it during principal photography because it wasn't, it would have been a waste of time with all of the cast and crew. That's something that gets bumped. We'll do that later. We'll pick that up later on. So I put a rough cut together, and it was ready to be sent off to the BFI and Film 4. And somebody on the execs, on the producer's side, on the group email back, said, I can't wait to see the rough cut. Really looking forward to seeing the dereliction at the beginning. And I thought, shit, I haven't shot that. And so I had some rolls of film left over in my fridge in the studio. So I saw the email, picked up the camera, went to the fridge, grabbed one roll of film, ran down the hill to my nearest harbour that my studio's just above, which is nothing to do with the harbours we shot in. And in 5 minutes, I shot all of the close-ups. I ran back to the studio. I took the film out of the camera, packaged it up, said to Denzel, you need to get this to Kodak today, and we're going to need it back within 48 hours. And he sorted it, and it came back. And I dropped all of those shots into the title sequence and then laid the titles over the top. And then me and Denzel looked at it and said, actually, let's not put titles over it, because these shots are great. Let's not use them as a background for titles. Let's ditch the titles. We can put everybody's name at the end. That'll be fine. And so it opens with these close-ups that were shot in 5 minutes because somebody said, I'm really looking forward to the sequence that I'd completely forgotten to shoot. That's the immediacy that you can do with film, I think. And I think that's what people think you don't get when you're shooting film, that everything's slower. But it's not. For me, it's completely the opposite.
Yeah, well, people conflate being deliberate with being slow. I'm curious.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
With to the point of shooting this over so much time and so many locations, did you, and just having that flexibility of shooting whenever you wanted, did you favor a single film stock, or did you have, because you can't have an in-progress magazine with the Bolex, right? It's like once it's loaded, you better shoot it out. And I do believe you did some creative things with your rollouts on this as well.
Yeah, if I've been shooting daylight balanced stock, and I know the next day we're going to be doing interiors, I'm going to be shooting tungsten, and I've got like 60 feet left on a roll.
Well, you kept the rollouts in the edit.
Yeah, well, I'll go out and just shoot stuff, and it's not on the shot list. It's not even in my mind, but I'll go around the set. My art department know that any prop they put in a set is never going to be just out of focus in the background. It's all up for grabs. So they're very diligent in how they dress a set, because they see me coming in with the Bolex with my 26mm lens on it and heading towards a prop that they've put, and suddenly
that one way back there.
Yeah, like huge close-ups of inanimate objects are kind of peppered through the film. So yeah, I will do that, and quite often those, because I don't shoot coverage, quite often I'll get into the edit and it'll be like, oh, I haven't shot enough shots to make this scene work conventionally, which is a terrifying moment. And then becomes a great moment. It's like, well, how am I going to make this scene work?
Sure.
What have I got? So I'll go through the bin and look at the miscellaneous stuff. And go,
So for that scene, did you have some daylight stock for when you're looking out of the porthole to the dock, and then were you on the studio? Were you then, with 500T?
Yeah, so I would have probably shot 500 in the studio, but then dropped a filter in because it would have still been lit with daylight. There was a little bit of fill light below deck, a little like fluorescent light, bulkhead light in the set, but most of the light was coming in through the hatch, so it would have been daylight. The thing is with the Bolex is the viewfinder's so dim, right? When I made Ennis Main, there were shots that we did outside on the moor that I couldn't see anything in the viewfinder. So what we would do is Mary, who's the actor in Ennis Main, I'd get her to block it maybe without her coat on, because she had a white jumper underneath. And so I would block it and see in the viewfinder what her movement is going to be. And then she put the coat on, I'd look in the viewfinder, I couldn't see her anymore. And then we would shoot it, and I would remember where she went, and then go cut, wrap, go home, lay awake all night going, have we got it? 2 days later, find out. Oh, and we always got it. Because it's like the faith. You do it diligently. You know, measure the focus. Don't do it by eye in a dim viewfinder. You know, the old adage of, what is it, measure twice, cut once? Or measure once, cut twice, whatever it is. The same for filmmaking. Just be really diligent. The camera hardly rolls on my set. It's all planning. It's all measuring, working stuff out, blocking stuff, and then the camera rolls, and that's why we only do 1 or 2 takes. All the mistakes are made before the camera's rolling. So, to go back to your question, in the viewfinder, I can't see a lot in the best of times. So dropping loads of ND in isn't great.
No.
So I would love to just shoot 500T on everything. And the film I do over here, I might do that. And I've got a camera now. I've got a slightly newer Bolex, which is a Super 16 with a 13 times viewfinder rather than a 10 times viewfinder, which is, I mean, it's, for me, it's like staring into the sun when I look into that viewfinder now. For most people, like, I hand it to some people, and they look at it and go, "Oh, I think the lens cap's on," and I'm like, "Nope, that's what you're getting." So I'd love to shoot 500 for everything because I just love the grain of it. I love how busy it is as a stock, but it's just impractical if you're sort of, you know, having to drop a low, you know, shooting that out bright exteriors and stuff. So we did it basically just on what was needed. So a lot of that would have been 50D and some 250D. I think the only stock we didn't use was the 200T. But then, you know, sometimes I would, because I'm not obsessing about a continuity of look. You know, I like the color to be kind of, it's all about the color for me. The kind of grain and other things like that. And I like it if it's a lack of continuity, because you're constantly reminding the audience you're watching a film, which is what I like doing. So, you know, I may have shot studio stuff and still have 500 in the camera the next day, and so I'll drop a filter in to daylight balance it and just shoot on 500 and then switch to 50, and then the shots cut together, and if it's a bit jarring, so what? It's a film. It's not real life. It's supposed to be jarring. Yeah. So, you know, but there's other bits where there's a scene in the film, or a shot in the film, where the camera flies across the surface of the water backwards with this kind of like drone sound on it, which is quite often gets pulled out as a real moment in the film. And that was just me. We'd filmed for like a couple of hours out at sea on the boat, and we were on the way back in, and I had about 15 foot left on the camera. So I was on the camera boat, which was a little sort of inflatable speedboat. So I went and lay over the bow, and I focused the camera to infinity. I think it was like a 10mm lens, and I closed the viewfinder, so there was no light coming in through the viewfinder, and I just fired the shutter and held it over the bow of the boat as we steamed in, and ran it at 48 frames a second.
That should do it.
And then when I got into the edit, I just played it backwards, and suddenly it's this shot of gliding across the surface of the water, like you're in the water but you're not quite in the water, and it's slow and it's abstract, and you add an ethereal drone. That's the key. Just add an ethereal drone to anything, and it's amazing. And then it becomes this transcendent moment. But that was never in the shot list, never in my thinking. It was just like, I might as well. We were on the boat on the way in. There was nothing to do. I thought, if I get in, I'm going to have to find shots at the harbour to fire off the rest of this roll. So I'll just do it now while I'm on the boat, you know. And it was on, you know, I don't use any grip equipment. I don't use tracks or cranes or dollies or anything. But I thought, I'm on the bow of a speedboat. I'm basically got the world's greatest track and dolly here. I might as well get a shot. And suddenly it's this huge production value that came from nothing. I almost didn't shoot it. Because I was thinking, actually,
it almost didn't belong in the visual language of this movie.
Well, also, I was really hot that day, and I thought, actually, I'm just going to put the camera down and jump off the side of the boat and swim in. And what I did is I shot that film, because I shot it at 48 frames a second. It just like rolled out so quickly that I then just handed the camera to my assistant and then took my t-shirt off and jumped off the bow of the boat and swam in anyway. So it was the best of both worlds.
Oh, I love it. Let's watch one more.
See, ethereal drone. So that was the day. So me filming the bow of the boat cutting through the water. Yeah. That was from the camera boat. The seagull's quite interesting. That was another one where we were just. I decided all of my films have got seagulls in them. I thought I'm not going to put
Well,
seagulls.
you are shooting in Cornwall.
But I thought I don't want to lean into that cliche too much. So I thought I'm not going to have any seagulls in this film. I'm going to have the sound of it, but I can't help it. They're just beautiful. And then we were having lunch one day on the quayside, and we all just stood around eating sandwiches, and somebody threw away a bit of a sandwich they didn't want, and suddenly there's like 50 gulls. And I was like, somebody else throw a bit of sandwich. So then somebody threw another bit of sandwich, and then another gull came in. And so I think that shot is the closest close-up. And Nick, Justin, the first AD, I think he threw up a bit of sandwich for that gull. So I think I used every usable frame because there's a sandwich that comes into that shot. But that's an example of the bit where you really go, is this going to cut together? Because we went to sea twice for 2 days, 2 3-hour stretches we went to sea, and everything else was filmed in the inner harbour because all of the fishing sequences were either below deck or shot at night where we were filming in a harbour. So we went out and we did 1 3 hours when I was on the camera boat, and I got those wide shots and the shots of skimming across the water and everything like that. And then we did 1 3-hour session where I was on the hero boat filming the actual actors. And so that is one of those moments where I'm on a camera boat shouting across to say, right, and it was like maybe the third AD was below deck, or somebody from the art department, Tony from the art department was below deck throwing the glove out through the hatch, and then Francis playing Murgy had to then grab the glove and then throw it back through whilst delivering these lines that I'm so far away I can't hear, but it doesn't matter anyway because we're not recording sound. So everybody's kind of shouting, and the camera boat's turning that way and the hero boat's turning that way. It's just an absolute nightmare. But I needed that moment. That's early on in the film. It's the first time they go to sea, and I needed the audience to buy that they're actually at sea. And the only way to do that is to actually show them at sea. So, and then 6 weeks later, we go into the studio, and there's Tony again hurling a glove at George Mackay's face through a hatch, and you're kind of thinking, what direction did it come from? And all of that kind of stuff, which we should be more prepared for, but kind of because of the immediate way we work, it's kind of just shot and then pieced together. Mm-hmm. So again, that was because it's so early in the film, and I want people to buy that it's a real fishing boat and we're really at sea. That really had to work, that sequence. And then you once you put the sound on it, it elevates it, and then you put an ethereal drone on it, and it solves everything.
That's it. It's easy. Yeah. Speaking of economy, I love how this wide shot of the boat on the sea gives such scope, because you're so confined. And I hope for your sake those sets had a flyaway wall. It's just, even with the Bolex, there's no room to move down there.
No. Well, Ed, who's not been in any of the scenes, but he's the boat owner, he gets really bad seasickness. And he was taking seasickness pills on the gimbal in the studio.
Oh, boy.
Let alone going on the boat. So, which it was unfortunate for him, but really made me think, well, this is going to look authentic. Mm-hmm. If we're inducing seasickness in the studio, then people are going to buy this as a boat. But yeah, it did have flying walls, but what the limit we put ourselves, the limitation we put on ourselves was we could fly the wall out, but the camera was never allowed out of the space because we didn't want it to turn into.
It reads. It definitely reads like.
We needed the claustrophobia, and the claustrophobia is heightened by the wide shots. And what I always think is, right, people working with low budgets, like I am, wide shots are expensive if you're designing them. Right, so if you've got an art department to come in and you're designing a set, if you're sort of returning this place back to a house, right? Mm-hmm. To do a wide shot, that's really expensive. To do a corner of it is cheaper. So I always think the closer the camera is to the subject, the cheaper the shot is. But that means that everything gets closer and closer and closer, which is great. But you need a release from that. So when you've got a free production design shot, mm-hmm. like Mother Nature providing the sea, then make the most of it while mm-hmm. it's there and while it's free.
Yeah, it's tremendous value. It's interesting too. In this film, it's supposedly this fishing village, but that's the only ship we ever see out to sea, which is pretty curious. I like that because
curious budget constraints.
Yeah, truly. Great. You guys want to watch one more?
Yeah.
Come on. I love these stories.
I'm going to watch the whole film in our sequence fragments.
I wish. So you storyboard none of this. This is just you arrive, you block the scene, and then this is what we're doing.
Yeah, and we were. I mean, it was one location. It was shooting one towards George and Cal on one side of the road, and then shooting back towards Ed in the truck on the other side of the road, and we had real problems with the continuity of the light. And by the time we came round to shoot Ed, the sun had completely gone, and so we lit it. The wide we managed to get before we lost the light, and then we went and got all of those close-ups, and they're all artificially lit. And that's my amazing gaffer, John Crooks, just lit it again, moved the camera closer. It's why it's all so close, because we're having to light for daylight. I mean, it's practically dark when we were shooting it. But that limitation then becomes really interesting, because I've got all of these close-ups that aren't in the script or on the shot list. You know, it was just a simple shot reverse dialogue scene, but I couldn't cover it. I had to get in and get these close-ups.
What's nice too is you have all this tight coverage that builds the tension, but it also anchors us in the POV of the character so well. The colors are so pronounced, and you said, I mean, across at least your last two films. What are your references for the use of color? So what kind of films, or I guess film period, do you gravitate towards that influence you in implementing and capturing color?
I suppose the Technicolor movies, but also anything shot on film where the color is really emphasized. You know, I think you can shoot on film and not pay much attention to color. You know, I shouldn't say it, but I see films now that I just think you haven't made the most of shooting on film. You know, you've shot it, and then it's been sort of, the color's been retimed or whatever, based on sort of a trend that's current that might be informed by the way digital films look, for example.
Right. Like I love in this film particularly how you capture the sky, and how often in digital, and it's kind of trendy to also let it go. And I love how it still maintains that deep blue.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it's not me.
Yeah,
you know,
just showed up.
It's film.
Yeah,
it's Kodak. You know, that's what the film gives us.
Yeah, so that helps you.
Sometimes it's dangerous, because you know, the image looks so good. You can point the camera at any old shit and it's going to look amazing, but it doesn't mean it's going to mean anything.
Yeah.
That's the trap you fall into. And sometimes when I'm reading Letterboxd, I sometimes get accused of pointing my camera at things that don't mean anything. But I think as a filmmaker,
stop reading Letterboxd.
Yeah, I know, but I can't help it. Yeah, and I mean, the great thing about cinema is that it's constantly dead. You know, every day somebody comes out and says it's dead.
Yeah.
Like the Lumiere brothers invented it in 1895. They invented it and then immediately declared it was an art form with no future. So people who invented it declared it dead straight away. So it's constantly having to invent itself, and I think it keeps everybody on their toes. You know, at the moment we're having to think of ways to sort of expand the cinematic experience because of the threat from the streamers. You know, which is why I love going out and talking about film and engaging with the audience and bringing in like a almost live element to it, because it's the thing that the streamers can't do. So yeah, it's 130 years old and we've done nothing yet. And the thing is, nobody knows where it's going to go. That's the beauty of it. We haven't done anything yet, but it feels like we've done everything because we can't picture what's coming next, because it's unknowable, because it's essential cinema. You know, we had to invent cinema to make sense of the way our minds work. It's the only art form that truly keys in with the way our minds work. You know, we're all time travelers. We're all filmmakers in our heads. You know, we're all jumping around in time and space all the time. And cinema is the art form that allows us to make sense of that experience. So it's not going anywhere, but it's going to have to constantly develop and evolve and jump forward and jump back in order to sort of avoid the blows of the rival things. You know,
we're as much of a process in film as film is part of ours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's watch one more, and then you guys get to ask the questions.
It's not all set on a fishing boat.
But a lot of it is.
Yeah, a lot of it is. But yeah, that was the toughest day of the shoot. Was probably the head to asshole scene, and there's another scene where they actually shoot the net in the daytime, and
difficult because you were at sea.
Yeah, I was so sick.
Yeah,
because I was looking through the viewfinder. I haven't been. I've been seasick twice, and it's both when filming at sea because you're looking through a viewfinder, and if you're not looking through a viewfinder, you're below deck in the fish hold with the diesel fumes changing a roll of film with your head in a changing bag, and so
Lovely.
yeah, it's a pretty grim experience doing that. So we did as little as possible. There's the bits with when he's showing them how to fish. We had to kind of, what I would say, like, I don't know if this is an expression here, but kind of hoover. Is hoover?
No, but I can learn.
A vacuum cleaner.
Oh, yeah.
So we say hoover instead of vacuum cleaner because it's a brand name. So I would say I had to hoover up the scene. It's like I was too ill to go, right, I need a close-up of that, close-up of that, close-up of that. It was like, right, do the action, and I'm just going to point the camera at it while trying not to be sick.
Spray and pray is what we say.
Okay, yeah. And I did that. I put a 10mm lens on the camera and shot everything in a wide shot with the three of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I never do that. But it was like, it's either that or I'm going to vomit on the camera.
That or an insurance day.
Yeah, exactly. But then, and I knew that we couldn't come out and do it again because the same thing would happen. So there's a couple of those scenes that I look at them and think, God, this is not me. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't normally do this. But they're quite, they're early in the film, and it's one of the only times you see the three of them in the frame, because then they all start falling out. So afterwards I go, that's actually brilliant. Maybe that was deliberate on some level. Yeah. Always when somebody says to me, oh, you did, I remember when Bait came out and we premiered it in Berlin, and in the first Q&A, somebody had had one of those questions that's not actually a question, it's a statement, and they said, it's really amazing that you've made a film, because it's about this fisherman who hasn't got a boat and he's trying to fish the traditional way, but it's dying out. He says, it's really great that you've made a film about a dying way of life using a dying way of making films. And I was like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. And then the next night we did a screening in the Q&A. Somebody asked me, what was your intention? And I said, well, I always wanted to make a film about a dying way of life using, that's obviously what I was doing. I just needed that person to reflect it back at me to tell me what I was doing.
Consciously, you were doing it the whole time. Yeah. You just needed the external world to reflect it back.
And sometimes it's levied as a criticism of people who say, well, this film was clearly made in the edit. It's like, what's wrong with that? Yeah. If you didn't want to
Where are you supposed to do it?
Yeah, where are you supposed to... If you wanted it to be exactly the same as the script, write a book. Don't go to the... it's a lot cheaper than making a film. So you should, the script should be the thing that gets you through the shoot. And then the edit, you kind of... You write the film, you write the final version of the film based on what you capture in the shoot, So I think that creativity should run all the way through to the end, because it does. It's a total creative process. We screened on 35. We screened Ennis Main on 35 here last night, and I went to see the projectionist during the show because it was like to say thanks for projecting it, because the projectionist is the final crew member. Can still be screwed up. 2023 we finished Ennis Main, but that projectionist is that final crew member who's still out there finishing the film for us.
Yeah. Your little silver halide friends made their final stop.
Yeah. They're all giggling as they go through the projector.
All right, we're going to open it up to some audience questions for you. So we're going to pass a microphone around to you guys. Just raise your hand.
I am sometimes a little selfish because I get the mic first, so I'm going to ask a question. How much is your edit locked before you start your ADR? I mean, are you editing essentially in silence, or do you have a rough cut and then you start your ADR and that helps to inform your locked picture?
Well, it changes. With Bait, I did a silent picture cut with no voices, and then Ed, who's the lead character, I wanted him to come in and do all of his dialogue first because I wanted his performance vocally to set the tone for the film. But he was on tour. He's a stand-up comic, and he was touring, so he couldn't come in. So I actually did a version of the film where I voiced every character in the film. Which when I'd done that, I thought, well, that's it.
Are you ever going to release that?
Well, then nobody will release it. I think it's the best version of the film, but nobody wants to distribute
Taking
it.
director's commentary track to a new level.
Yeah, I think it's an abstract avant-garde masterpiece, but it does sound like somebody going insane.
The Criterion audience will eat it up.
Yeah, but with Ennis Main, there's very little dialogue in it, and Mary, who is the main character, and whenever there's somebody on screen in Ennis Main, it's Mary, and she's my partner in real life. So we would go to the studio and just record her dialogue. That was very easy. With this one, because the actors were kind of contracted, and it was based on their schedules. Like George and Callum, very busy. It was set when they were going to be done. So George, I had an edit. When did we shoot this? We were finished in sort of third week of August. By October, I had a decent edit with quite a lot of the sound done, and I'd composed quite a lot of the music and recorded the music by then as well. So George came in October and did all of his dialogue, and then everybody else came in one by one. And I tweaked the edit based on, I would leave scenes long so that the actors could come in and sync, record their dialogue to picture, knowing that actually that line might not be a sync line. So they were quite clunky scenes, but not too clunky, because I wanted them to have that sort of rhythm while they were voicing it. So it's quite an organic process going along. And Callum was really busy. Callum was away shooting in Spain. He went off and shot rosebush pruning afterwards, and I think that was what he was doing. So he came in right at the end, just before we locked the whole thing. And every other actor had done their stuff, and then Callum was still waiting to come down, and I'd voiced Callum's dialogue. Callum's got a much lower, very different voice to me, so I'd voiced his stuff, and I pitch shifted it down a little bit so it was lower, and it was partly so that it didn't sound like me, so when everybody else was watching it, they didn't think, oh, that's the director's voice, and I didn't feel self-conscious about it. But also just to get it to sound a little bit more like Cal. And I kind of thought the film was done, but for Callum's voice. And I thought Callum will come in and he'll do his dialogue, and it'll be complete, but it won't really change the film particularly. And, Callum's schedule was all over the place. I was thinking, worst comes to worst, I can just leave my voice in, which contractually was never going to happen. But so eventually Cal was free, and he came down and he recorded his dialogue, and then we watched the film back with his dialogue in, and it changed every single thing in the film. It was like the final piece of the jigsaw completely completed the picture. It was nowhere near sort of 99% finished like I thought it was. Callum's voice being in the film changed everybody else's performance, changed George's character having Cal's voice in it. And I looked at it with Mary and was like, I don't understand this. This is witchcraft. And I suddenly thought, this is the beauty of cinema. How does this work? And I asked the question, never wanting to know the answer, because that's the unknown with cinema. How does it work? And on the flip side, how can you have a brilliant script, brilliant actor, brilliant director, brilliant everything, and make a shit film? Doesn't make sense, but it happens a lot. But then you can, and I'm not talking about my film here, you can then make a film that can, not as a shit film, but I'm now going to say the opposite and say you can have all of these things come together, sometimes accidents, and create a masterpiece. I'm not talking about my film, I'm talking about other films. And we don't know how it works. And if we knew how it worked, then
Everybody would do it.
Everybody would do it, yeah. And you wouldn't have traditionally a huge turnover of studio heads and execs and everybody terrified for their jobs because they don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. But that was a lesson. It was insane how the film changed just by having Callum's voice. And partly it's replacing somebody who doesn't act, having a true artist, actor and movie star come in and voice their dialogue. Obviously I'm not, that's a massive part of it. But I don't understand how it can be such a seismic change on other people's performance and the whole atmosphere of the film. It's just magical.
I love it.
Hi. You mentioned wanting to avoid shooting film that you're not going to use. So how much of that plays into the rehearsals that you have to do prior to shooting? And what is that process like with rehearsing?
Well, the way we shoot is very fragmented. So like the dialogue scenes between George and Callum there below deck, the way they would be shot is that I would set up a close-up of George, for example, and we would run the scene, and we'd start running the scene, and the camera would, after 27 seconds, would stop. And so then we cut, and then I have to wind the camera again. Then George jumps back a line in the scene and then picks it up again and goes on again. And then the camera will run out again, and then he'll have to jump back a line. And sometimes the whole roll will run out, and then I'll go off and I'll be 2 to 3 minutes changing the roll, because I like to change the roll. I don't let anybody else change the roll, because I like to thank each frame of the film individually as it comes out the camera. And then I'll go back and we'll pick it up again. So for the actors, it's very fragmented, so they don't get that flow. So it's very important to, before the camera's there, is to run the scenes with the flow, so they can get their idea of, they can do what they need to do. And almost run it like a piece of theatre. Quite often on the key side, we just run it and stand there and not think about the camera, and then fragment it once we're shooting, and do a single or do 2 takes of each bit, which is complicated as well, because you kind of, on a scene with George and Callum, I might do the first 27 seconds on a wide or a mid. And then the second 27 seconds, I might go in for a close-up, and then the last bit will be an extreme close-up. So the way to do it is I'll kind of run the scene in order like that, and then the second take we'll have to reset for the wide shot again, so that they have some sort of chronology in terms of what they're doing, which is a pain for the camera team and the lighting, because we might be resetting back to things we've already done. But the priority is to allow the actors to have that kind of continuity as much as they can, because I'm really messing with the way that they would normally work. But they were amazing. Like I say, they were there because of the way that I work, just rather than despite the way I work. And talking specifically of George and Callum, they're both people who just want to be challenged. They don't want to be doing the same thing over and over again. Cal's a total cineast. He knows. He watches everything. He knows everything. He knows everybody. He wants to, despite being a movie star in the ascendancy, he's an artist, and he's an actor in the true sense. And George as well. You look at George's filmography. I knew that one of my films wouldn't look out of place on George's filmography, because he wants to do something different each time, and he wants to be challenged. So, without putting words in their mouths, I'm sure it was incredibly challenging for them. But at least that's what they told me. They wanted to be challenged, and I think our true artists like that do want to be challenged.
Yeah,
thank you.
Hi, I find your ability to capture your hometown and the personality of that town very beautiful and inspirational. I was curious how much of that is deliberately chosen, in maybe the screenwriting process or the shooting process, where okay, if I capture these elements of this town, that will communicate the personality of it to your audience, or how much of that is just you're following your gut feeling of, if this looks beautiful to me, so I'm going to shoot it, and that then delivers that story and that personality.
Yeah, exactly that. I try not to think about anything, ever. My dream is to never think and just feel. I love watching films that. There's a quote. It was either Derek Jarman or it was Robert Bresson said, "I want the audience to feel the film before they understand it," and that's the approach I take to shooting. I don't want to. In any aspect of life, I don't want to think about things. Just want to feel go with instinct, because I do think the brain in the gut is the one that gives you clarity, and the one in the head is the one that fucks everything up. So overthinking stuff is something that I really try and avoid. But sometimes you do have to think about stuff, because there'll be limitations, like the village that we portray in the film. We were lucky enough to get a village where we could shoot a wide shot of the main street, and we could use the pub that was in situ on the street, and we could use the post office, food bank / post office that's on the street. Have you seen the film?
I have not.
Okay, sorry, spoilers here. But everything else was kind of fragments from elsewhere. We needed a cottage interior that we couldn't find in the village, and May, who I was talking about a minute ago, had just her house was just being sort of renovated, and so we were able to shoot in that house. So that I think that involved some thinking, You have to go, is this going to work if we jump from this village to this village? And you go, well, yeah, we'll just keep the camera close and we won't see what's out of the window. And suddenly all these limitations are on me. And once the limitations are in place, you're left with, right, you're shooting in this location and you can shoot 2 angles. It's like, great, nothing to think about. Everything else has been ruled out. On the boat, when the fishing sequences are all at night on the boat, and we shot it in this harbour with the boat tied against the wall. I won't explain exactly how we did it, because for those who haven't seen the film, I really don't want to ruin the magic of it now. But there was a big supermarket on the other side of the harbour, which meant I couldn't shoot that way. So everything had to be shot that way. So it was great. So we didn't have a moment where we were sat around thinking, oh, what's the best angle? It's like, we got one angle, so that's the best angle. Shut up, let's start shooting. And that's the best thing, because like indecision is the worst possible thing. And the gut doesn't do indecision. If you listen to it, it doesn't do indecision. All the indecision's up here, and that's what slows things down and complicates things. So yeah, but it's not easy. You know, you have to. But you know, when's it not a good idea to follow your gut?
Okay, I'll go.
Go for it.
So the question I had for you was, is there, like, when you were on set at any of the days, was there any happy accidents that you thought worked really well in the film, and was there anything that you really didn't like that you had to cut?
I mean, there's so many happy accidents. The whole film's a happy accident. I was saying this earlier. I remember when I said this when I was in New York promoting Ennis Main. I sort of did a Q&A where I was talking about all the accidents that happened on set. And again, I don't spend all my life on Letterboxd, but I was on Letterboxd and somebody said, oh, the film was really good, but Neon had distributed Ennis Main, and they said somebody from Neon needs to give this guy some media training because he's given the impression this entire film was made by accident. But I'm happy to admit there's loads of accidents, because if you're somebody who shot a film, you know, right? You plan it all in the script, and you can see it all, and it's a perfect film on the script. You can imagine every shot, and the camera's pushing in there, and the perfect light here, and you write all this stuff. And first day of the shoot, it's like go, and then everything starts going wrong, And you've written the script on your own, and you're thinking, this is amazing. I can picture it's all perfect, because you don't imagine bad things. You don't imagine a bad version of your script. You imagine this perfect version. Then you get on set, and then you've got all of these other people who've all got input, and you're thinking, why are all these people ruining my perfect film? And it's not. It's because making a film is, you're sort of at the mercy of all of these variables. And then what happens is you then get into the edit and you realize all of the gifts that you've been given through all of these amazing collaborators that you're working with. And like I said before, if you want a perfect script, if you want that version, write short stories, or try and get a book deal, because just surrender yourself to the vagaries of the shoot, the odd decisions you make when you're sleep deprived, or somebody's saying you've got, somebody might go, Mark, you've got 3 more setups to do today. And you go, okay, how much time have we got? And you go, well, we wrap in 15 seconds. Like, okay, right, we're going to have to do that in 1 then. And then you think, oh, this is a disaster. And you go home that night and think, this is awful. And then you get in the edit and you go, that's the best thing we shot. Because it was the pressure of doing it. So there's so many accidents. And more often than not, the accidents that really pay off for me in the edit are delivered to me by the film stock and the limitations of my camera. So when I roll 100 foot into my camera, I'm very careless about it. I do it in daylight. I do it in broad daylight half the time. And I put the film in, spool it, run it for a few seconds, and I've no idea how much of the front of that film has been fogged. So I'll shoot stuff that's not in the script. I'll go around, I'll shoot some seagulls, predictably, or an inanimate object, or I'll get an actor to say, walk through the shot, I'm just going to get a shot of your feet, and actually I'm going to run it at 48 frames a second rather than 24, just to speed things up. And then when I've shot 10 foot, I know that I'm safe then, and it won't be fogged film. And then at the end of the roll, I might be doing a dialogue scene and the camera spins out and I've got 3 feet left. I'm not going to start another bit of the dialogue scene with that 3 feet. So I'll just go, hold on a minute, I'm going to go and change the role. And while I go off to change the role, I'll just film something that I'm walking past, something that the art department have put as a prop. Then when I get into the edit, I have all this random stuff that I wouldn't shoot if I was shooting conventionally. And quite often the stuff that's fogged is nuts. You know, it'll be an inanimate object, but there'll be a light leak, which will make the inanimate object seemingly move. And I go, right, that's the key to this scene now. That's the key cutaway. So there's like numerous examples of that throughout the film. There's not a lot that gets left out because I don't shoot enough to leave stuff out. Because again, I don't want to leave my guys on the floor. They all deserve to be in the film with all that effort they've put in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm currently in the process. I'm a DP and I'm transitioning to writing and directing. And I just finished writing my first short film that I'm gonna direct, DP, edit, and shoot on film.
Yeah, good. I was going to say, take your DP with you.
Yeah. And I was just wondering if you have any advice for someone in my position.
No. Have you got any for me?
What's that?
Have you got any for me? No, my advice is just to follow your gut and realize what the limitations are. You know, somebody said to me last night about why there's so many close-ups in my films of people's faces, and it's become an artistic choice. But in the first instance, it was because as a director, I wanted to be the person on the crew who was closest to the actors. I didn't want anybody else between me and the actors. So I would go and get close to the actors to talk to them. But because I was the DP, when I got close to them, the camera came with me. And so I ended up shooting close-ups out of necessity, because of the limitations of the way that I worked, which has now become a choice, an artistic and aesthetic choice. So I think just make sure you're designing a film. I don't mean production designing, but building a film that is achievable within those limitations. You know, you don't want to be a self-shooting director and you're shooting huge wide shots with the characters in the distance. You know, you might. But you've got to be aware that that's not going to suit kind of what you're doing, you know. And the other thing is just to make sure you've got a really good assistant for each department. You know, you've got a great script supervisor, you've got a great first AD, you've got a great first AC. You know, because the thing is, I can't remember who said it now, but somebody very wise said that the filmmaker, all a director does, is to formulate a vision. It's the first thing. Whether they've written the script or not, they formulate a vision. And the only other thing they do is surround themselves with people who can realize that vision with them or for them, you know. And you're surrounding yourself with yourself to a certain degree, but then that means it's even more important to surround yourself with those people who are on your wavelength and really get it and are hungry and have got the energy for it that you've got. That would be my advice. But as with anything, like, there's a Jean-Luc Godard quote, "Show me the budget and I'll show you the movie." You know, tell me what the limitations are and I'll show you the film that I can make for it. And it's the same. It goes through every facet of filmmaking. So don't overreach. You know, and I don't know what that means, because making a film is overreaching in its conception. But just make sure you're doing something that fits the way that you want to work. You know, my films don't have a great deal of dialogue in them, and it's because we have to post-sync everything. So every line of dialogue really has to earn its right to be in my script. I never let my actors improvise, because we don't record a guide track of audio on set. So if they improvised, I'd get in the edit and I'd be like, well, I've got no idea what anybody's saying. There was one line at the end of my film where George made a suggestion for a dialogue change, kind of one of his last lines of the film. And he said, "I've got an idea for this line of dialogue." And he was absolutely right, because by then he knew the character really well, and he knew that character better than me. Rewrote that line of dialogue. The insane amount of admin that was attached to him rewriting a line of dialogue. Every script that was on set, I got everybody to rewrite it, cross out the dialogue and write it in pen, so that when I got into the edit and into doing the sound, that I knew what that line was. So you've got to stick to the limitations that the way you're gonna work is gonna sort of impose on you. And they're the limitations are the best thing, you know. I'm a professor at Falmouth University within the film school, and I always say that the thing that students, and I did it the same when I was a student, the thing that bothered me when I was a student was deadlines and lack of resources and a strict brief. It's like the three things. It was like, oh God, I'm not ready to hand it in. You know, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't like that brief, or you know, I haven't got the right camera or whatever. And actually, those three things that pisses everybody else off in that context are the three most valuable things when you get out of education. Like a deadline is the best thing you can possibly have, because a deadline means that you're going to finish stuff. So all the way through making films, limitations are the best things that you can have. So I would write down your limitations and formulate your vision within those strict limitations, because we all know of filmmakers who maybe don't have any limitations on themselves anymore and possibly don't make their best work.
Thank you.
We have one more.
Is it definitely one more? Okay. Hey, Mark.
Hello.
I'm such a huge fan. I actually just finished a film that I developed in beer, down with Joanna in St. Ives. Do you know Joanna? Maybe?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I was
In
curious.
beer?
I developed it in beer. Yeah, I work
Okay.
in a brewery. So
Okay,
I shot,
good.
yeah.
Multitasking.
Yeah. But I was curious to know, like, when it comes to making a film like this, the process of making a film like this, like, are you drawn to a smaller story? You know.
Yeah, I think I do. I do think small. I mean, I went back to shooting film at a time when it looked like film was going to die out, and I panicked and thought. And I was shooting digitally by then. I'd started on Super 8, and I'd followed the logical process, and it was shooting digitally. And I thought, actually, I'm going to shoot film while I still can. So I bought a cartridge of Ektachrome, and I went and shot a film, which is called The Road to Zena, which is just outside St. Ives, in brackets, an ode to Ektachrome. Because I thought, this is the last roller film I'm ever going to film, because Kodak's going to go, Fuji's already gone, that's the end. And I went and shot this film. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And also, I fell back in love with filmmaking through shooting that cartridge of film. And then I realised that I had on my shelf some Kodachrome that I'd shot in Ireland 10 years before that had been processed, you know, in the old way that doesn't exist anymore. And I had it on the shelf. I think it was 3 rolls. And I cut that together, and it was a diary film. It was me going through Ireland. And I cut it together. I can't remember the trip, really. So all I had was these fragments on film. So I wrote a new narrative, and that became a film called Dear Marianne. And that ended up playing loads of festivals. And that was the point where and then I made another short film on Super 8 called David Bowie is Dead. And it gradually, these films got shown at more and more festivals and won awards. And I thought, actually, why aren't I making my feature films with the same sort of freedom that I'm making my short films? I'm making these short films with no money, no exec producer, nothing. I'm just making them with a freedom that allowed me to like writing a diary, write with complete freedom in a diary, because you know nobody's ever going to read it. I was making these films like that. I was making these diary films thinking, I'll only show this to an audience if I'm happy with it, which gave me such freedom, completely opened up my mind. And I was like, now I'm making stories for an audience, and the audience is one, and that's me. And if I like it, I know that there'll be an audience. You know, it might not be a huge audience, it may be a huge audience, but who knows, but there will be an audience. And I think that's when I went kind of smaller, because of those short films. And then I took my approach to making short films and then applied it to first Bronco's House, which was my 44-minute long film, which was the precursor to Bait, and then a feature film like Bait, you know, which then goes on to success and win a BAFTA and all this kind of stuff. And it was definitely from going small. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mark, for coming and imparting your process with us. It's been a pleasure. Long overdue.
Well, thank you so much for coming out, and thanks to Kodak. Ever since I heard of the Kodak House, I wanted to come in. There's been a few times when I've almost come and then the trip hasn't happened. So I thought I was never going to get here, but it's been an absolute joy. I always wondered whether it was a real house, and now I've been inside. It is a real house. Yes, Rosa Nevada is out on Friday, tomorrow. It opens here and in New York, and then opens wider. Nico's from the distributor. He'll. And there's a screening this evening at the New Art, which we've already missed the beginning of, I think. or could people run and get there?
This is LA.
No.
No.
It's
But you
too far.
should see it. Yeah.
And I think the previous two films, I think Ennis Main's certainly on Hulu.
Yes.
And
I think Bait is.
I think Bait is as well.
Yeah.
I always say that. I don't know what Hulu is. We don't have it in the UK, but everybody's seen it. It's big here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of Disney.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you.